Okay, I think we are gonna go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me clearly? Perfect. Okay. Get my notes up. Okay, so welcome everyone to Broadcasting the Stars STEM and Outreach panel, and thank you for joining us today and for participating in Black Space Week hosted by Black and Astro. Today's discussion, we will focus on STEM education and outreach, particularly within physics and astronomy, and we'll be exploring how scientists, educators, and communicators engage diverse audiences, foster belonging in STEM spaces, and expand access to meaningful learning opportunities. My name is Phoenix-Avery Sarian, and I will be serving as our moderator for today's discussion. I am a recent graduate of The Ohio State University, and this fall I will begin my PhD in physics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison as an NSF Graduate Research Fellow. Alongside my research in astrophysics, I'm very passionate about science education, outreach, and understanding how people learn science across a variety of settings. We are fortunate to be joined by three distinguished panelists whose work spans astronomy outreach, physics education research, and university STEM education. Their experiences offer unique perspectives on how we inspire curiosity, support student success, and strengthen connections between science and society. And now I would like to introduce our panelists, first starting with Dr. Jimmy Negus. Oh, sorry. Jimmy, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jimmy Negus. I completed my PhD in astrophysics from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2023. And I'm currently based at Colorado State University now. My path has been a bit winding. I started in astrophysics and now I'm in the realm of fusion energy physics. I've authored two books, Mysteries of Space, Black Holes Explained, as well as Supernovas Explained. I also serve on the board of directors for Dark Sky Colorado and the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Negus. And then next, we have Dr. Erin Flowers, who will introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Erin Flowers. I completed my PhD in 2023 as well at Princeton University, where I still currently work as an Associate Director of STEM Education with the Center on Science and Technology. My research is both theoretical and observational characterization of the atmospheric dynamics and chemistry of Titan. And I've previously worked with the NASA Dragonfly mission, running computational models of Titan's atmosphere. And in addition to this research, as an associate director, a lot of my job is very similar to a traditional professor. I teach both archaeoastronomy courses as well as astrophysical data science courses to undergraduates here. But I also do a lot of outreach. Our university's prison teaching initiative in particular has taken a lot of my time, especially in the summers, developing curricula in physics and math for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated students, as well as also developing and running professional development for graduate students, postdocs, and faculty in terms of shoring up their science communication skills when they go out and do outreach. And then with whatever spare time I have, I also do a lot of my own public outreach between Trenton and New York City, where I live.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Flowers. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Geraldine Cochran. And then Geraldine, you can introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am Geraldine Cochran. Since everybody else said the year that they graduated, I'll say I finished my PhD in 2013 from Florida International University. I am a physics education researcher and right now an associate professor of physics at The Ohio State University. Um, I think I have learned over the years that outreach takes on many shapes and forms. So I consider a lot of my committee work and service connected to that outreach. I'm the past chair of the American Physical Society's Forum on Education. I am a member of the Commission on Education for the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, IUPAP. But also I developed and co-directed a summer program for middle school girls. I volunteer with local communities like the United Way and the Civic League and the Urban League. So I think there's lots of ways that we can engage in outreach within our, sort of as Dr. Flower said, within our formal positions, but also informally, if this is something that we are dedicated to and we feel is a part of our mission. So looking forward to talking about that with the rest of the panel today.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Cochran. And then for our audience and attendees, you guys are more than welcome to ask questions as well. We probably won't get to it until the end after I have the set list of questions, but you're feel more than free to use the chat feature as well. And with that, we're going to get into our first question right away. And so for our opening, our question is going to be, how did you first become involved in STEM education and or outreach? And what keeps you committed to that work today? And whoever wants to answer first, go ahead. You can take your time thinking about the question as well. Yes, Dr. Cochran, go ahead.
So I will start and say that I think being involved in just education and outreach without a STEM focus is something that is kind of was instilled in me, I think, from my family and the religious group I grew up in. It was a lot of volunteerism as a part of the congregation that I was in, and a lot of community. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so we did a lot of things with people who lived in the huge apartment building that I grew up in, and just like on our block. So just kind of volunteering and for the community, I think is something that was instilled in me. But I think my first, like maybe formal experience was with Dr. Mel Sabella when I was an undergrad at Chicago State University. I was in a scholarship program that required that I did so many hours of service. And so I volunteered to do service with him, and he had organized a STEM outreach day for middle schoolers at a local school. And I did it, and I loved it. And I think that kind of gave me an idea of what I could do in terms of what I'll just call maybe formal outreach, and specifically STEM outreach experiences. I know that time we're like using the rare earth magnets and helping students to create little, I'll call homemade motors. I'm sure many of us have done those kind of activities, but that's what we were doing. I had a blast. The students had a blast. And from there, I worked with a Marsh White Award, which I think was from the Society of Physics Students. And so I worked with some of the other undergrads in physics. We applied for that award, we got the funding, and then we went to high schools around the south side and the west side of Chicago. And I loved that experience talking to people about physics because many of the students that I talked with, like me, had not heard of physics when they were in high school, had no idea what they could do with it. And so I think that is what kind of started the journey for me. And again, it sort of leads to what I mentioned earlier, which is that once you have that kind of like love of outreach, it will take on many shapes and forms in your career, especially if it's something that you're committed to doing.
It's funny you started in the south side of Chicago because that's where my story begins too. So I went to the University of Chicago and was studying physics. And my first year was a struggle. Physics, quantum, I was really having a tough time. And for me, outreach offered me an opportunity to re-engage with the fun parts of science again. And so in a sense, it kind of saved me and gave me a sort of refreshed purpose as to why I was on the journey. So I joined, the Society for Physics Students, our Ryerson Astronomical Society, and my purpose, in a sense, became to share the wonders of astronomy and the universe, which I cared so deeply about. And I'd say that really evolved in grad school at the University of Colorado Boulder. We have a Fisk Planetarium and the Summers Bosch Observatory. And I would say I spent more time at these two places than in any classroom or in any textbook. And so I really think that I got my PhD in astrophysics, in outreach for astrophysics, because I spent so much time engaging with the public, with students, and really showing that you don't necessarily need a PhD to understand the universe and to share its wonder and beauty. And so it really took a life of its own. And I'd say to this day that is what motivates me is sharing that knowledge and making the information I've worked so hard to attain, making that free for everyone I connect with.
I am not from Chicago. My story doesn't start there, but I am from the Midwest. I'm from outside of Detroit, Michigan. And I come from a long line of teachers. My grandmother was a teacher. My father was a teacher. Like his aunts were teachers. Like everyone was a teacher. And we could not spend our summers idle. And so we had to like, if we weren't reading or like practicing like in math, we had to do something that was like giving back to the community. And by the time I was in high school, I was like a regular docent at a local like science museum where it was like, it was engaging, it was giving back to the community, it was educational. And it, started to fulfill my National Honor Society requirements by the time I was like a junior in high school. And I just always loved working with kids and like getting them excited about science, like from like the really, really little kids, like 2-year-olds who would come in and were just interested in playing with the models, up to like the disinterested teenagers who were there because they had grandparents who made them do stuff over the summers, but then they saw how cool science could be when you just kind of met them where they were at. Um, and when I was in undergrad, I was at Columbia University in New York, and we had a really big like outreach program, which a lot of people were surprised that we would have like sidewalk telescopes. So they're like, we're in the city, like there's no lights, like what can we see? And we serviced a lot of like the Harlem, the Washington Heights, the Hamilton Heights community. And we would set up our telescope in our little observatory on the roof of the physics building, and we would still be able to point out like, yeah, that's the Andromeda galaxy, like on a really good night, or like the Orion Nebula or Jupiter or Saturn. And I always still like remember there was like this girl who was definitely like brought there by a family member who didn't want to be there. But when she first saw Saturn and its rings, like her entire like demeanor shifted. And that was just super special, where it's like you are working with someone who really doesn't want to even like be there and engage with you. It's like been like forced to the water, so to speak. But they really like want to drink it in once you are just like kind and share your own enthusiasm. I took all that like, outreach experience from undergrad and brought it to grad school at Princeton, where we also have public observing nights. And it's just like even better being in a darker location where, our public members can see, even further, even darker locations. And it's always just been so fun working both with like, the academic public, the, university community, but then also, like I said, the Prison Teaching Initiative, which is like something we volunteer to do for free. It was a big part of the astrophysics department here. It was started in the astrophysics department here. And so service and education, giving back to like, students who don't have the same advantages has always been part of the ethos of like the department here, which was like incredibly special. And so it's made me a better teacher. It's been great for like my professional development, but it's also like always gratifying to like, speak to people who didn't even know that they were interested in like what you're talking about until like you start talking to them about it.
Can I just say, Dr. Flowers, what you just mentioned kind of reminded me that even when you have people who come to the events that maybe you organize or participate in that are not interested, they're there because someone told them they had to be there. Like you're still planting seeds that may, eventually grow and blossom into a love of science. I would say telling a little more of my story, that was the case for me. In high school, I mentioned I didn't know what physics was. I only took physics because I was told if I take physics, I could go to Six Flags Great America for free. That was it. And I wanted to go to Six Flags. Didn't know what physics was, but knew that was my ticket to,
Ours was Cedar Point. Like if you took physics, you got to go to Cedar Point.
that was why I took it. And of course, I had a great time at Six Flags Great America and totally failed my assignment there because I was riding roller coasters and not doing any of the things I was assigned. So then I had to read a physics textbook and solve problems from the back of the book where there were no answers, only the even problems. And that is actually what really made me love physics. It was reading that textbook and going through the challenges. And that's when I was like, I want to write a physics textbook and I want to create problems like this. And that really is what led to my journey. So you never really know kind of where things lead, but you continue to create these opportunities in these spaces and know that it will land in ways that you might not even find out.
Thank you, three of you guys, for explaining your how your root and your love for education began. And then that naturally leads us to our second question and going about why outreach matters. And so why is STEM outreach especially important right now? And what role do you think outreach plays in society beyond simply teaching science content? And whoever wants to answer first, completely fine.
I'll start because it's something that I've been thinking about like for my job a lot and the people that we talk to at the administrative level. Um I think like everyone can agree, we're like witnessing a really rapid deterioration of trust in academic and research institutions. And the downstream effects of like that lack of trust have really serious repercussions for like everything that's part of our lives. So, you know, when I first got into outreach, it was like about sharing my love of science, hopefully like bringing more scientists who like look like me into the fold. It was just like about um more like for the love of the game kind of. But now like as an educator, as someone who's like functioning in the academic ecosystem and has to like almost play politically. It's like been really interesting, like being in my particular role, which is like kind of faculty, kind of admin. We are now talking about STEM outreach as like purely just a way of like trying to communicate to the public how research happens and why it's important and why they should support it and like why it deserves funding. And all of that has to do with like tackling some of the large problems that we're facing in our society right now. So it's like definitely kind of shifted tone from a very positive, like everyone belongs in science, like everyone should be a scientist if they want to, everyone can be a scientist if they want to. But like right now, at least like from what I'm seeing in my position, a lot of it is just like we just need people to understand what scientists, like what we are doing, what engineers are doing, so that they can like continue to support it because it truly is like a public, like national, global endeavor, and it can't go forward without the support of like everyone. And then like even on a smaller scale, something that we're seeing like even in classrooms teaching, it's just like really good for like, you know, increasing critical thinking skills in a variety of different axes that are necessary to navigate life. So like, of course, you develop your critical thinking skills in like a lot of different areas, not just like STEM areas, but like it's one like way of like learning how to solve problems, learning how to tell fact from fiction, which is like, you know, incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Dr. Flowers. For me, astronomy has always been like the gateway science. And so I use that as a tool. Look at these pretty stars and galaxies and planets as a way to not scare folks off from the really intense math and the complexities of the physics. And so I think we can use outreach as a tool to get more folks invested in STEM, which of course is a pragmatic workforce development pipeline. And so I really, the angle is to not scare folks from the science. Taking a step back, a bit more abstract too, astronomy for me, there are no borders when you're looking down from the ISS. And so really at this time in our society, in this global stage, dissolving those barriers for humanity is something that I really believe in. And I think astronomy outreach is one of the most effective tools for showcasing our shared humanity. And so I try to lead with those two. I've given astronomy talks to very polarizing audiences. And when we're talking about, the heart of a black hole, those boundaries seem to dissolve. And so I try to emphasize, more of those opportunities.
I think I'm gonna start by thanking Phoenix for this question. Phoenix kindly shared these questions with us ahead of time, so I had a little bit of time to think about this. And I think it's an excellent question, so I'm glad that you offered that. Dr. Flowers said a lot of what I plan to say. So I'm gonna echo some of the things that you mentioned. Um, being a part of many groups that have been historically excluded from science and science education, I think it's important to me that we just have the opportunity. For me, it is very much a social justice issue. When it comes to physics education research, the work I do is equity oriented because I want people to have the opportunity to choose. And when I think about my work, looking at graduate programs in physics and astronomy, you know, not everybody wants to do a PhD in physics or astronomy. Like, so if someone does, I feel like we should do all we can to support them and help them reach that goal. And yet there's so many policies and practices. All right, that's what, so I'm gonna lump that into the word systems that make it difficult or for some people impossible to pursue their dreams. And so excluding people who have a desire is one of the things that I try to counter with my work. both my formal research as well as my informal outreach and education activities. Another thing I'm going to echo Dr. Flowers when it came to the fact that critical thinking skills. So I often teach physics courses for engineering students, and I tell them, like, you might not identify as a physicist, but y'all are physicists too. But I also say, like, even if, this is your last physics course, because that's often true for some of the computer science engineering students I have, like, they only have to take so many physics courses. And I'm like, physics teaches you how to think about problems, and it helps you to not be afraid of problems, right? As Dr. Flowers mentioned, those critical thinking skills that are transferable to whatever field you go into, but also even into your personal life. I think about when I have problems, and I'm a person who likes to talk them through, and I call up some of my friends, like, we have ways in which we tackle problems that I think are unique to our community. But then the other thing I think about is when it comes to policies that impact our communities. And when I say our communities, I really do mean people who are minoritized due to ethnicity and race, and people who are from socioeconomically disadvantaged households. I grew up in poverty. Um, I think that we are often impacted by decisions that we're not necessarily provided with information on, and it makes it difficult to advocate for ourselves if we are not aware. And so I am not an environmental scientist, but I can at least read about the issues that are going on in relation to that field and to other fields and the health fields, and come up with um my own thoughts and my own advocacy in relation to those things, even though I am not an expert in those areas. But at least I have learned how to find credible information and to make determinations about what I stand for in relation to in relation to that information. And my background in physics, I think, has allowed me to do that.
And if I could just add one thing. So the tail end of that question was, beyond science, what's the value of outreach? And I think for all of us, simply doing it, you know, is an example that, for underrepresented folks, you can still have a voice, you can still become an expert in a field. And so our presence alone, I think, is a message.
Perfect. Thank you all for your responses. Kind of like what Dr. Negus said earlier, how astronomy is a pinpoint for a lot of people about to go into the sciences and looking at pretty pictures as well. It's very pivotal. And then also the scientific literacy that comes along with scientists who want to teach the public on how are we able to see the truth and the false within the science as well, and how are we able to better ourselves as well too. Yeah, and that also leads us perfectly into our third question and representation and visibility. Many of us can point to a moment when we finally saw someone in STEM who looked like us or shared part of our story. How does representation influence who feels welcome in physics and astronomy, and what still needs to change?
I'm happy to take a stab at this. So representation is, I mean, for me, everything. So I have been applying for the astronaut program for the past 12 years. And, that goal has felt far for me. But I was introduced to astronaut Alvin Drew, who was the last Black astronaut on the space shuttle missions. And seeing that representation has been motivation for me. Do not give up on this dream. And I think without seeing, another Black astronaut, it might have felt even further for me. So by seeing someone in that role, it shows me that it's possible. And so I'd say, representation is, like I mentioned before, it can be the difference between abandoning a dream and continuing on the path. And so that's a huge part of me why, I left the field of just doing science every day to outreach, is because I felt that I could have broader exposure and touch even more students and show them, hey, you can be a Black physicist, you can be a Black astrophysicist, you know, it's possible. And so that's where I think representation is absolutely essential. What still needs to change? So I mean, for my graduate program, I was the only Black graduate student in a huge department, and I've visited several departments that look very identical. So I think just having more underrepresented folks in the classrooms and in leadership positions, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I definitely echo a lot of what Dr. Negus was saying. I didn't even know that astrophysics was a career path until I saw like Neil deGrasse Tyson on History Channel before Twitter, like back when I was a kid growing up. Mae Jemison was like a huge inspiration to me as just like another Black woman in like space science. And my dad's a Trekkie, like seeing Uhura like as a kid growing up, like a, you know, an intelligent Black woman doing stuff in space. It was just like everything to me that it's like, yeah, you can be intelligent in a position of power and it's not tied to your race or your gender. Um, and I think that, you know, very similar. Like I was only the second Black woman in my department ever to get a PhD in astrophysics. And like when I started, there were no other Black graduate students. I think there were like two or three Black undergraduates, and like that was it. Like I was like the most senior Black woman in my department, the most senior Black person in my department. There weren't other Black faculty, there weren't like other Black postdocs. I'm glad that by the end of my time as a graduate student, that changed to like we now have like a Black faculty member. There are more Black postdocs, there are more Black grad students, or even more Black undergrad students. And I think like, you know, the number one thing I would always say that I want to change is I just want to see more of us in like these spaces. And I also want there to be like more support for those of us who have now been in these spaces to become better mentors, like to the next generation as well, to have like the space and the time to like share our energy if like that is like what we want to do, to not like be attacked if we don't have the breadth to be like the be all end all like model minority for like those students who are coming up after us. Like it shouldn't be on us to like do all of that cultivation. But then if like we do want that, and especially as like those of us who are like, you know, becoming more senior, like having the support and the resources to do that if that's what we want to do. Because definitely as an undergrad, like there were people who I reached out to who I thought would be good mentors for me, but they simply did not have the bandwidth for it, because they were the one and the only in their department or the region. Um, and so, yeah, I wish there were more institutional supports for as people become more senior in academia to continue providing support, both for like those of us who are like in those minoritized communities, but also for like those who are not in our minoritized communities who might want to be allies and who might want to be better allies to like improve together as a community.
I want to address the latter part of Phoenix's question. Also, I want to say I co-sign everything that Dr. Flowers and Dr. Nika said again. So thrilled to be on the panel with you all and have you all say these things because it's exactly what I'm thinking. Um, but the latter part of what you asked was like, what still needs to change? Man, and in one sentence, a lot. Two words, a lot. Um, my research group and I actually we recently finished a chapter on graduate education in STEM. So it's broad, not just physics, although we pull a lot from the physics education and research literature, but also engineering education and chemistry education as well. And what we were asked to do with this chapter was to reimagine graduate education in STEM and to do so through a lens of care and justice and collective thriving. And I think the current systems that are built are not built that way, right? They weren't built for that for like anybody. And they certainly are not built that way for people who are minoritized and marginalized. And I'm speaking specifically within the US, but what we pulled from our research is there are challenges in STEM graduate education, like globally, so not just nationally. Um, I think about from the admissions process, I'm thinking about some of the things we talk about in the chapter. It starts from just like navigating how to apply to programs and understanding what it's like to apply to a large program versus a smaller program. Should you reach out to faculty? Should you say you want to work with specific people? Should you not? How are the decisions made? Is it made by an individual faculty member or by like a rotating committee? The pathways that we follow in graduate education. Um, the milestones, the qualifying process, which looks different from one department to another. And like, there are places where it actually works well, but there are places where it's awful, where people are hindered from progressing due to outdated perspectives and policies and practices regarding written qualifying exams. That, yeah, I'll just say it really does hinder people who are motivated and who have the potential to contribute so much to research from continuing in their progress. Um, and reaching their dreams. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done because we just finished like this weekend our chapter on STEM graduate education. That is what is central in my mind right now, but it's true with undergraduate education, and it's also true when it comes to the high school level, right? There are still extreme inequities when it comes to K-12 education that are then perpetuated at the collegiate level. We expect students to come in calculus ready or having taken calculus when there are still high schools that don't offer algebra 2, algebra, pre-calculus, or calculus, right? Students who don't even have the opportunity to take trigonometry, and then they're thrown into, you know, a class that they are either feel they're not ready for, or they're told they're not ready for, or they're prevented from actually moving on in their career, their academic career, I'm referring to, because they don't meet math prerequisites or because of where they placed on a math placement test. Like, there's so many structural problems with education through the entire pipeline that sometimes it can feel overwhelming. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, there is still a lot to do. But I will say that from the time I started in physics education research as an undergrad in 2001 with my mentor, Dr. Mel Sabella, I have seen some progress, which is why I continue in this field, because I feel like a lot of work, specifically in physics, a lot of progress I have seen has been the result of physics education research, highlighting some of the inequities and also publishing best practices and how we can change policies. Um, and practices to make for better systems so that we can have things like collective thriving. And so, yeah, a lot to do. The needle, I do think, has moved within the last 25 years, but not at the rate that it should have.
I will.
Phoenix, can I add? Oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Doctor.
I was just
Go ahead, Erin. Dr. Erin.
I was just gonna say, like, Dr. Cochran, like, really reminded me of like one of the other things I wish would change, which honestly is like almost ironic, but I wish sometimes we were a little more research backed in our approaches to teaching, because there is a ton of research out there about, like you said, like graduate assessments, about entrance exams to colleges, about how we are tracking learning and growth, and how we are teaching, and how, there are better modes of education out there to make sure that everyone who wants to get a degree in physics or astrophysics can get one if they want one. But like, universities have been very slow on the uptake of adopting those educational research practices, whether by like dent of like they simply don't know about them, they aren't going out of their way to like read that research, or by dint of like, well, we've always done things this way, and so we shouldn't change it right now. Like, so yeah, I wish we were like a little more evidence based in our own like teaching practices at like that, like broader global academic level.
I was going to very briefly say regarding representation. So Dr. Flowers made a reference to Trek, and one of the most impactful characters in my career, Deep Space Nine, the best Star Trek, Captain Benjamin Sisko, dramatically changed my career because he was a compassionate Black leader of Deep Space Nine who had a team that respected him, fully competent. And he really, like before grad school, gave me a symbol to follow. And so I just say the power of representation, again, is essential. And for leadership roles, you need leaders that understand the complexities and challenges, as Dr. Cochran was saying. So that's all I'll add.
Perfect. That was amazing. Thank you all for your responses. Kind of echoing that, like for myself, I went to a predominantly Black and Hispanic high school, and majority of my classes were GT or AP courses, but then coming into PWI, that transition was very difficult for me being the only, at the time, the only Black woman undergraduate in my department. But then I had to create my own support systems in a way where I was making friends with a lot of the Black and Hispanic graduate students in both departments of physics and astro as well. And so then I've been able to take that in response and then also help mentor incoming Black students at OSU too. So there's one way of kind of bridging that gap in between when you didn't have support, then creating the support that you needed too. But yeah, amazing responses. And then moving on to our fourth category, reaching communities. What are some common mistakes institutions, my apologies, make when trying to engage new audiences, and what approaches have you seen work well instead?
I'm gonna just start with saying a mistake is not actually knowing and working with the community that you seek to support. Um, and part of that is understanding the resources and the values that you have. Like I have participated, the majority of the, I'll say, university-based outreach activities I've participated in have been positive, but there's definitely been some cases where it's clearly um academics feeling like we are the experts and we're going to tell your community what you need, or we're going to come in as saviors, or just looking at the people and talk like, after the event, you're talking to people and they're in this, oh, whoa, these poor people who I feel so sorry for and have to help. And it's like, that's not even the right mindset. The communities that we serve, and that can be very broad when I say communities, the communities we're serving with our advocacy, with our outreach, with our education, they all have some value, and they also know their communities better than we know their communities if we're not a part of that community. And so I think part of it is kind of listening and learning. I mentioned starting a program with a math professor when I was at Rochester Institute of Technology for middle school girls. We volunteered at the middle schools for probably a full year, where we talked to the middle school students and we talked to the administrators and we learned about what are some of the challenges of doing this. Oh, we have to get buses, or because if we don't have a way for them to get to the university, it's going to make it difficult for certain people to apply. Oh, these are the kind of things that the girls are excited about, and these are the kind of things that the administrators think would be most beneficial to them, rather us kind of coming in and saying, this is what you need to do and this is kind of how to do it. um I have volunteered in rural Virginia. I grew up in the inner city. I didn't really understand. Like, you can read about things, but until you talk to people from another community, understanding that some of the challenges of the students that, we were working with in rural Virginia, like, get to know the community first. And I think so when it comes to one of the things people get wrong, I think it's assuming one that there's a one size fits all and I can like write out my plan, and even if this might be a funded project, I can get my funding and then I know what to do. Like, no, that's like maybe the start. The first part is kind of building a relationship with the community you want to serve, learning the resources that they have, the expertise that they bring about their community and other things, and then working collaboratively with them to develop those spaces.
I almost can't even add anything to that because it was so perfect. My big thing is meeting communities where they're at rather than having this, prepared sort of spiel. And, you know, it's like a natural evolution. One example, so my girlfriend is a third grade teacher, and she was like, can you come talk to my class about astronomy? And so, in my outreach brain, I have like a very basic slide deck and talking points, and I get to the classroom, all of that goes out the window. They have a million questions. They just want to engage and have fun. And, what's going to happen in a billion trillion years, right? And so I had to abandon what I thought was the solution and meet these students where they were at. And we ended up chatting about the craziest astronomy questions for an hour. So I agree with everything Dr. Cochran said.
Uh, yeah, I think you both hit the nail on the head. Dr. Negus literally took the words out of my mouth because I had written, we don't meet the communities where they're at. So I guess I'll like address the second part of your question, I think, which was like, what have you seen work well? And, I think just like trying to bring everything back to something that is like super relatable in everyday life that's common. And a part of that comes from learning about that community, right? And it can be hard, especially with astrophysics, where we're like studying these really big out there things. Like, how do we bring that back to the daily? How do we make that something tangible for classrooms? And doing it in like a hands-on way. And not, by classroom, I mean just anywhere that you're acting and teaching. It doesn't have to be like a literal room. And doing it in like tangible metaphors, doing it in like touch points to, things that are going on in the world that people care about. When I'm like, working with like young boys in Harlem, I'm like talking about the Knicks game and like how we can think about like the physics of like basketballs and like spinning objects that are round and like how we can bring that back to something that's bigger. Um, you know, I do a lot of stuff that touches on like astrobiology. And personally, I also really love plants. It's kind of like blurred in my background, but my office is full of plants. These things that like a lot of people care about plants or they care about like vegetables or fruit or something. Like there's something tangible that everyone can think of as a touch point, and then just like kind of expanding from there, I think is always worked really, really well. And just like being a person, I don't know how to like best encapsulate that, but like take off your like I'm the expert hat sometimes and be like another curious learner with your community. I think is always a really great way of making people feel comfortable to ask questions, like bringing them into, astronomy, astrophysics, STEM. Part of meeting them where they're at is like also admitting when you don't know something and being like, yeah, like I have to look that up. Or, I haven't heard that before. I get a lot of people who like to talk about, things that might be vaguely considered conspiracy theories, but like not shutting that down and being like, I haven't heard about that. Let's like look into that together. I feel like all of these are things that I've seen work really well, that I've done and like I've seen it work really well. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like, being in the community with them, hearing what the community needs, what they want, what they get excited about, and bringing that into your outreach and your teaching.
Um, Phoenix, if you don't mind, I've been listening and thinking, I actually want to speak to it from another perspective as well, and that's from more so the formal education side. I think one of the things that we continue to get wrong is to think that the policies, the rules, the things like that are have more weight than they do. Dr. Flowers kind of mentioned earlier, like people are like, but this is the way we always did it, or this is the policy. And so it's something I just find myself saying to my mentees over and over again is like, right now there are these academic hurdles that you have to get through, but remember, like, it's all made up. Like, it's none of it's real. So I recently got tenure and like, thank you. But I'm like, it's like all of these things that they're held out for us, like, they're made up. Somebody came up with this policy and was like, this is how we're going to do admissions. This is how we're going to determine where students get placed in terms of their classes. This is how we're going to determine this, that, or the other. None of them are based on physical laws. And I grew up in a religious household, even though I'm not religious, none of it's based on divine law. It's a group of people who came up and said, this is how we'll do things. And so I think as someone who tries to be an advocate for improving things from an equity perspective when it comes to formal um, science and STEM wide education, it's always starting with like, we can actually change things and we should. Right. I think my research side of it is like, here's evidence that we need to change it and how we might change it in ways that work, but also just realizing like, it's not real. As I talk to students who are stressed about their candidacy exams, I'm like, look, it's a hurdle that you have to get through. Here are all the things we can say about preparing for it. But remember, this does not actually evaluate your potential at all. It doesn't actually say whether you can do research, whether you'll be a good researcher. It's just one of those hurdles. And in academia, like we learn to jump through the hoops. I was talking to someone recently, it's like we're like seals and we just like clap and just jump through the hoops. And those tend to be the people who succeed. It's not necessarily based, and I'm not discrediting the merit or the work of those who have made it, succeeded in academia, because the struggle is real. But all of those who've left and who've been pushed out, there are people among those groups that have had the potential as well. So I think one of the things that we get wrong is how we talk about um, these metrics of success that have been that are a part of the educational ecosystem. And again, I'm speaking specifically about the US because that's what I know. Um, and that's something that I would like to see change.
Thank you all for your responses and your insight into the topic as well. And kind of like what you said, Dr. Cochran, there's some sort of hidden curriculum that we often view, especially within within especially in university systems and how they measure success, quote unquote, for different students as well. And then that leads us into our fifth topic, kind of related to our third topic, science communication in challenging times. So we are living in a moment where public trust and expertise, education, and scientific institutions are being challenged in many ways, including the current presidential administration. How has this affected your outreach or educational work? And if so, how?
I can go first. It has definitely impacted it through, the series of events that led to universities getting their funding massively cut. Those cuts have come here as well to like the wealthiest university in the country, and it definitely has impacted how we serve our community because I've learned way more about how endowments work than I ever thought I would, but a lot of how we can serve the public is wrapped up in how people who've donated money have said that that money can be used. And so now that we've had a lot of like cuts, it's meant we can't support faculty who want to do a lot of outreach. Like our office is very special in that like we are a place where faculty and postdocs, if they have, grants and they want to do outreach, they can come to us. They know and trust us to like help them do really incredible outreach programming with that funding. And we no longer can like support those faculty in the same way we had before in our own courses, which sometimes they're like community engaged scholarship, those are courses that are co-taught in the communities actually. So they might be co-taught with community college students, with incarcerated students. There's like a bunch of these. We have less of those courses now because of the way the funding has changed. It's changed just like kind of like the basic outreach that we do. We have to do stuff with a little amount of like purchases as possible, trying to stay within a smaller budget. And so what I talked about, things that work really well with like hands-on activities, those hands-on activities cost money. They require materials. We have less of that because we can't spend money, pretty much outside of undergraduates often. So we have to be like really creative with like what resources that we do have, which has been a challenge, but it's like, an interesting challenge how we can still try to maintain the same quality of work that we've done in the past on a reduced budget. But it does mean that we have like less resources and also in some cases less time, like especially if it's like with faculty that we work with, sharing the load of time of doing outreach is impacted when we can't support faculty the same way. So it's all kind of stemmed from a distrust in STEM education, and it's just kind of, institutionally impacted the breadth and the quality that we are able to do on a normal basis.
Yeah, no, so I will say, so I am in a fully designated outreach role, and my grant is a 4-year grant, and funding is guaranteed at least for 2 more years. So on a professional side, it's been fairly secure, but on a personal side, so I am involved with the Fisk Planetarium, and we have a SciAct grant, a NASA SciAct grant that is for narrating heliophysics content. And that grant has been cut, as well as a few grants for other astronomical societies I'm part of, inherently limiting the scope of this outreach. But, I had a mentor several years ago say, "Hey, Jimmy, I want you to write a mission statement." And I was like, "What do you mean a mission statement? Like a personal one?" And, by forcing me to do that, it made me question, what is my purpose with outreach, right? Is it to use federal dollars to do this thing, or is it the outreach itself? And so while these major grants have expired, my ground based efforts have increased. And so this, for Dark Sky, Colorado, doing one-on-one outreach, stargazing, giving free talks, the mission hasn't changed. I've just had to adapt and to still find ways to share my purpose, which is educating folks on astronomy and astrophysics. And so I'm one of those people where if 100 people show up to my talk or 3 people show up to my talk, I give the same talk. And so that's been my sort of guiding light, is touching even one person it can change their universe. And so that's my guiding principle.
Yeah, so in terms of impacts, I also had a grant terminated last year, and actually it was my grant that focused on improving graduate programs and called, in fact, it was the Inclusive Graduate Programs Project. Um, we still do the work. I wasn't motivated by the grant in the first place. So I'm still writing and still investigating how we can improve graduate education in physics and astronomy. Um, I've had a collaborator walk away from a paper we were working on. She's a computer scientist in Texas, and she's like, it has equity in the title. It's like, yeah, and I think that's the best word for what we're talking about in this paper. And she's just like, where I am with my career and where I am, what my institution is saying, I just feel like I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And people have made that decision. I'm not going to judge their decisions, because in life, I think you need to make the decisions um, for yourself. So I'm not going to make those decisions for them. But I'll say for myself, like in terms of the work I do, it has not changed. How I talk about specific things. So I should say, like in Ohio, SB 1, Senate Bill 1 says that diversity, equity, and inclusion within higher education is illegal. So what does that mean for the work that I do? So I've talked to some people who do, I'm gonna say, similar work to what I do, who are like, we can just like change the words we use. They're like, we just have to be strategic. Like we could say, this, that, or the other. But for me, I realize like my mission has not changed. Even if I do talk about things differently, which I don't know that I do talk about things differently, my mission hasn't changed. So prior to 2025, I wrote a paper, I think it was 2020, maybe 2020 is actually when I wrote it, like not a paper, a blog post that was like, I really don't like the words diversity, equity, inclusion together because they lose their meaning, right? We just say DEI, and what does that actually mean? And so I broke down how I see those things as different. And so I always say my work is equity oriented because like equity is my goal. And so I think about one of the grant proposals I wrote in 2023 that was not terminated, and one of the things I said is like, I want all students who want to take an introductory calculus-based physics course to have the opportunity to do so and the support that they need to be successful in doing so, regardless of their math background. And so, like, that is what I wrote throughout the proposal. I actually did not use any other words because those words often have lost meaning. They became trendy. So as I see people not just pivot in the words that they use, but in the work that they do, I can see those who were new to this and those who were true to this. Because for those of us who had a mission of making positive impact and changing these systems that are problematic, that are oppressive, that were never really built for the broad population to navigate through and be successful in, regardless of how I talk about it, like the mission is the same. And so it is definitely resulted in me having some really interesting conversations with people who continue to do the work. I'm just gonna label it the work. And those who have shifted the work that they do or their mission, whether that be based on, well, we have to do what like people are funding, so this is what I'm gonna do. Funding wasn't my motivation. I mentioned getting tenure. Tenure was never my motivation. Like none of those things motivate me, so they don't necessarily change how I do what I do. Um, but it's definitely made me think more about the decisions that I make in terms of the things that we talked about early on this panel in terms of our like our goals and why we want to see, you know, why we engage in outreach, why we engage in STEM education work. And so kind of like Dr. Negus mentioned the mission, right? Writing that mission statement is helped me. And I think it's something that we should do continually throughout our careers is to go back to our mission and sometimes maybe update our mission because it is our mission that gets us through challenging times. I think that's how you described it, challenging times. Um, when we can go back to that central thing that drives us. Because like if you believe in a mission or a calling, right? That doesn't necessarily, that central mission, that calling doesn't necessarily change based on what's going on around you. And so, yeah, I started to ramble a little bit there, but hopefully that made sense.
Okay. Thank you all again for your responses. Like you all echoed, it's a very difficult time, especially when this in the field of science, in all disciplines. For myself, I used to work at a science museum downtown in Columbus. A little over there, a little over a year I was working there, and then due to funding cuts, they let go of all the part-timers for educators, and even some of the full-time staff as well. And that was probably when working there was one of my pivotal moments in my undergraduate career. I made so many connections and outreach, not just at the museum itself, but the opportunity to just go around different schools in Ohio and do outreach. And I was able to pivot more to the Columbus Zoo and start working there as well. So I'm very fortunate to still be in outreach. But again, it really is difficult times for us with all the funding cuts. Um, for saving time, we do have some questions in the Q&A. I'm going to ask one more question from the list that was already made, and then I'm going to pivot into the Q&A that the attendees asked. And so this goes into different perspectives. Each of you works in a different or part of the STEM ecosystem, whether that be formal education, university STEM education, and public science outreach. How do your approaches differ, and what can those spaces learn from one another?
I'm happy to kick it off. So, for me, it's actually very little change. So, the main difference, obviously, in like a university lecture setting is the technical depth needs to be a little bit more rigorous. But the guiding principle, again, for me is I've learned the more I can remove myself from the equation, the better. So I see it as we're on this spaceship and we're looking out and we're trying to understand some really cool astrophysics. And I am a passenger just like you. And so I say more wows in my own talk than the audience because I'm truly fascinated by the content. And by making it not about me up there talking and how smart I am, I think it offers more authenticity and it shows that we're all trying to understand this. And I think astronomy is a unique field because there is so much we don't understand. You know, most of the universe, right? Dark matter, dark energy is totally a mystery to us. And so I lean into that uncertainty and use it as a humbling agent so that we can become vulnerable and just be fascinated. So I'd say the common thread is the spark and the variance is the technical depth. So if I'm giving a public talk to K through 12 or the general public, obviously that's going to be different than first or second year undergrads trying to get course credit.
I think one of the big differences I've had in my role and the Center on Science and Technology, which I mentioned at the beginning, it's really interesting because we are a body on the campus whose mission is to uphold the STEM education standards on campus. So whenever there's a new science class, if it's going to be for your science accreditation, it comes through us. And we've had a lot of conversations about, for a lot of students who aren't STEM majors, the only class that they take, and there's two of them technically, there's one that's with lab and one that's without lab. The only science classes they're getting are the classes that we approve. How do we like bring those students in and make sure they have a good experience with science so that they leave university still being STEM literate, even if they are not STEM majors? And what we always come back to again, it's like kind of meeting people where they are. It's getting creative and it's getting really intersectional. So for myself, that has been pushing into my discomfort about getting both like creative with like the arts as well as learning a lot of history. History was my least favorite subject in school, but I learned a lot of history in order to teach an archaeoastronomy course, which is a history of astronomy around the world, because we're often only taught the Western tradition of astronomy when it's a global tradition. It was talking to other people who've done this research. It's like cold emailing people in completely different fields. Um, and it's also learning how to like use my hands to create things and to tell stories with physical objects, because that's also a lot of the history of astronomy. And I hate hands-on arts and crafts. Arts and crafts was like also my least favorite like class when I was like in school. And I think like everyone in my office does that. Like we all came in with STEM disciplines, but we've like learned a completely new facet of how that can be applied in a non-STEM related way so that we can deliver the best STEM education on campus. And then when we take that into like our outreach events and our in-reach events, because we do a lot of like stuff on campus for the campus community as well, looking at like the science of food or the science of like keyboards, or, you know, just like anything and everything has science in it. And we do like a lot of events that are just to draw the community in, even in a non-traditional academic setting. So that's been like really different for me. I don't think I've really seen a lot of other faculty have the opportunity, which is great that we get to learn so many other things that are not just to our specific field in order to improve our own science outreach and our own science teaching.
So, work-wise, all of my work has been connected to academic institutions. I worked at the Science House at NC State, and I'll say that was the most that felt like, even though it was affiliated with the academic institution, the most that felt kind of like not necessarily the traditional academic space. Um, but I think for me, the if like you have an equity and a social justice focus, then you really have a people focus. And so I think the people you reach and how you reach them can shift based on the positions that you're in. Um, I remember when I was thinking about quitting graduate school for the first time, and I did quit that graduate program, and I was talking to my mentor. um I mentioned him a few times, Malsavella, and he was like, I told him, I was like, I think I want to teach high school. And he's like, oh, that's awesome, because like you'll be able to impact so many students, all the students you're gonna have in your class each year. And I was like, oh, this is okay, this is a viable path. And it is. And thinking about that in terms of who you get to reach, whether it's at the high school setting or, you know, within higher education. I think with my research students, they have a very different, I get to talk to them more, right? And they have a very different relationship with me. Excuse me, in previous roles I've had as a program coordinator, I've worked in student support services, right? There's a certain number of students that I get to talk to because they're a part of my caseload, and I really get to build up a relationship with them. In fact, one of the students who was a part of the center defended his PhD today, this morning. So I'm still in touch with and still following those students that I had back then when I was at RIT. Um, but even if I think about the students in my class, and I teach large enrollment courses, I've taught up to 300 students in intro physics courses, which typically are, you know, some of the large ones. And there are a lot of things that I read when I get those end of course evaluations. I read them, I read every comment, I take them pretty seriously. And there are some common threads like, her exams are really hard. They are. But I believe that it's a good thing to be challenged and try these hard problems on the exams. But something else that's, I think, a common thread is they'll say like, she actually cares. She really cares. I want them to know that there are people who are here who care about not only just like their progress in the course with them as humans. I'm fortunate to have had so many amazing mentors that I still call, that I still text, that I still meet for lunch when I'm in town, who have helped me, who have shaped my life, not just my academic world, but like my personal life, who I've talked through things with, whether it was like just life things, okay, buying a car, buying a house, all kind of things, challenges with my family. Like I've had these people because I have found mentors that care about me, right? Not just like I am not just, a person who was in their class or a person who was their mentee in the program. And so I am a mentor in formal programs, right? I have mentees. And then I have the students who I at least can give them like this perspective of how I view education and the things like, and I talk transparently with my students like, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. And this is what I wish I could do, but I can't do it. And here's why, kind of reminding them the things that I believe are important to know, which is this is just a structure and these things are not your potential. It's one of the things I used to write on the board before every exam. Exams are a hurdle that you try to get over to pass the course, and the course is a hurdle that you try to get over so you can get the degree you want, and the degree is just a hurdle so you can get the job you want doing the things you enjoy, right? Like I constantly try to remind them of those things because it's something that I very much believe. um but then, like I said, I have my research students who I meet with often, who I get to talk to more, who I get to kind of like dream with as they shape their own careers and their futures and make decisions about if they want to go in academia or if they want to go to industry or what they think they want to do. And so I think the different roles allow us to interact with and hopefully impact people in different ways. And so realizing the maybe resources that come with the position is something that's very different. Like when I was in one administrative position, I was an assistant dean. I had many. I got to make funding decisions, right? There are some people who are not in the classroom, but they get to make funding decisions. Um, I got to make decisions regarding programs and policies. I only had so much, I'll use the word power here. I only had so much power. I was an assistant dean, right? Reporting to the associate dean. But like I was able to change some things for the better in ways that I wouldn't have been able to do in a faculty position, in programs that are specifically student focused. And like I say, being in a student support system, like that, I have so much respect for people who do that work and do that work well. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing. I think we communicating again, like I'm talking about academia because that's what I know, but communicating within that ecosystem of academia, understanding, respecting, and connecting to student support systems or centers and things like that. Like here, I developed a course, but I developed that course talking to faculty in engineering you know, who can tell me what they expect students to have, say, from an intro course. I talk to the student support services folks and talk to them about like, here's how to help the students if they come for tutoring, and also learning from them, like what the students need and what other courses they're taking. So I feel like the more we collaborate across these different positions, the better it is. And then I'm going to say outside, because within academia, we should collaborate with, learn from folks who are outside of academia who are doing STEM education as well. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you guys for that, for your input on there. Kind of speaking from my own personal experience, while at OSU, I earned an education minor, and so that included coursework in multilingual education and also educational psychology. But then I've also been able to implement those courses into myself as a grader in my astronomy courses, but also in my outreach as well, different museums. And so it seems that you guys in a position of having a PhD, you have so many different ways of whether it's in the classroom or doing outreach in communities, you have so many responsibilities that does seem challenging, but also there's beautiful output to that as well. So I'm very appreciative for that. And then we are going to go ahead and pivot into our attendees Q&A. So our first question is from Giovanni Bacon, and they asked, from your personal experience, what have you seen that has been the most efficient or effective way to connect and motivate students from both K to 12 in higher education?
So I think that when it comes to motivating students, your approach must be multifaceted because people are driven by different things, right? Like sometimes I read applications for the RU program. I'm a director of the RU program, and I read a lot of personal statements. We have 500 applications this year. And then also, grad programs. I read a lot of, applications to grad admissions. And like for some people, like they were like, I knew that I wanted to be, you know, an astrophysicist. I knew that I wanted to do this, or I did that, they have this background and they have this goal, and their goal is what motivates them is kind of like making the process to reaching their goals very transparent so that they know they can succeed. I think most people want to be successful. They want to be successful. So if we just I think Phoenix mentioned it, if we would just demystify and reveal the hidden curriculum, right? That is what they're looking for. Explaining the pathway, elucidating the pathway. But for other people, I think about, for me, like coming from low socioeconomic status, like I wanted to be out of poverty. Like that was my goal. I thought physics was really cool. When I took physics in high school, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is the first class that seems like it's not just busy work. Like I'm learning stuff and I can actually apply it to lab setting and see that this, calculations I made, like it actually came true. The projectile landed where I said it was going to land. Like that kind of stuff excited me. But my goal was like to actually have a job that would support me. And I feel like within the United States, that's a goal for a lot of students. So when I talk to high school students, when I talk to students in my class, like I mentioned the finances. We got to talk about the job and career aspects. I'm very much workforce readiness focused when it comes to education, which is interesting because, well, I'm not going to go down that tangent. There are some people in my institution that feel differently. But that is a real motivator for some people. And then there are other people who are like this is physics and astronomy, so like they want to know how they can give back. Like research shows that some people have been turned away from physics and astronomy because it doesn't seem like a field where they can give back or that they get to work with people. So helping them to see what I'll just maybe label the human side of physics and astronomy might be what motivates them. And for other people, like it's just seeing that it's cool, right? I think Dr. Negus talked about like talking to those third graders and just like answering the questions that they have. Like for some people, that is enough to motivate them. So I think it really is coming in with multiple strategies and figuring out for each person and each group how, like what resonates with them. So if at all possible, starting, your conversation with questions rather than answers so that you can learn what motivates the folks that you're talking to and sort of connecting with them that way.
I second a lot of what Dr. Cochran was saying. I was like, my number one thing was kind of leading with like, here's this thing that we have to learn today, and here's how it's going to like help and serve you in meeting your future goals, whatever those might be. A second thing I'll say that I've seen work more universally, and it means different things depending on the age group, but play is a really great motivator for students. So with littler kids, this is like, they always want to play, and just bringing play into the educational experience has always been really good to motivate them to learn something. And in my own classrooms in college, I have a lot of assignments where it's like, I want you to make something or I want you to tell me a story, and I want you to incorporate what we learned about astrophysics in that thing that you are making. And my students are always like, really? You just want me to like make something? And I'm like, yeah, I want you to like demonstrate an astrophysical, like, every week we talk about the history of a certain culture. And then we also talk about an astrophysical concept, kind of like your standard overview astro course. And I'm like, I want you to take what we've learned, take inspiration from like all the cultures we've talked about or the things you've seen in media. And I want you to make something. I want you to play. And I want you to like exhibit what you've learned about science in that play. Or we'll do hands-on demonstrations of astrophysical terms that are playful. And so like the high school and college students are shocked that you're asking them to play in the classroom, and it makes it easier for them and more comfortable with making mistakes, with messing up. Collaborative play is great for them to learn together, and I don't even have to do too much. There's actually a lot of really good astrophysics board games out there. Like I just read a whole like astronomy education journal article that was ranking a bunch of different board games that are teaching physics and astrophysics concepts. And yeah, I think we just don't have like a lot of opportunities to play as like children or even adults. And just having educational, playful activities has been incredibly efficient in bringing people in.
Uh, Very great points, Dr. Flowers. My comment on motivation with outreach, it's a little counterintuitive, but I'm kind of against leading with just knowledge, right? Especially in an AI tech world, knowledge is not the problem. It's the imprint you leave, right? And so as an undergrad, some of my worst courses were taught by the most knowledgeable physicists on the planet. It wasn't a knowledge difference. It was, did I feel a mutual level of respect? Did I feel humanized? Did I feel like after this course, I was empowered to do my own exploratory search, right? Because you can only teach so much in an hour or a semester. What type of skills are you investing in students? And so that goes to Dr. Cochran, seeing your students, seeing your audience as human beings, and having a mutual respect, listening, and really motivating well beyond you being gone. What are they going to pick up the next day based on your lecture? That's where the true growth happens, right? That's where the blossoming happens, is in the post process. So that's just my take on it.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And then I'm going to switch around our questions just a little bit due to time. So this question, and apologize if I pronounce people's names wrong, is Marquise Tomlin. And Marquise asked, as a first generation astrophysics undergrad and only Black person in my classes, do you have any advice? I want to get my PhD, but don't know where to start or whether it is too late for me as a senior graduating fall 2026 to keep the momentum.
I will say it's incredibly important to find your community outside of your department. That's what got me through graduate school was like, being part and active with the like Black Graduate Caucus, with National Society of Black Physicists, with like the Committee on the Status of Minorities in Astrophysics at the AAS. Like just finding your people on campus and off campus is like incredibly important. And like reach out. Like you can reach out to me. I'll put my email in the thing in like the chat or something. Like, and I'm always happy to talk to like people about like where they should consider going to grad school, the questions they should ask, like, other like current grad students, especially if you're looking at a program that has one Black student in it and you reach out to that person, like, sometimes they won't answer, they might not have the bandwidth, but like in my experience, when I was like in that position, a lot of people did take the time to like talk to me. So I think like if you are considering a PhD, just like ask all of the questions that you can, reach out, like don't be afraid. Like I said, I'm totally happy. Like if you're worried that someone might not be receptive to it, I'm really happy to answer any questions. About my experience and like the experience of others that, my friends have given me like the permission to like share. Just learn all that you can because it's like a huge undertaking. Like it's like 5 to 7 years of like traditionally like your mid 20s into your 30s. Like that's like an incredibly important time in your life. And like it's not a decision to be made lightly. And I would say like you don't want to spend those years like miserable because like you don't have a community, a supportive community around you.
I would absolutely say it's not too late. Networking is huge. Some of my personal advice would be getting clear on what this dream means to you. For example, like for me, astrophysics was something that became so deeply entrenched in me that this was like sort of a fire. And, when grad school got challenging and professors were not available and I didn't have study groups, I could always return to that wonder that I had. And that sort of, it made the journey, it's like this is why you're doing it. And I think having a purpose, you know is absolutely fundamental to weathering the storms. So I'd just say get clear on, is this something you truly want to pursue, and use that as a force.
Um, I will say that if you are not a member of the American Physical Society's National Mentoring Community, you may want to consider joining so that you can connect to multiple mentors. I'm a big believer in the constellation mentoring model rather than like one mentor. Got a lot of people um, that can answer your questions. I've always thought you should surround yourself with people who've been where you're trying to go. So definitely like looking for astrophysicists and first generation astrophysicists within that community to mentor you. The other thing is just given what you said, like you are where you are time wise, you might also want to look for post-bac positions. There are some that are just a semester long. So something that might carry you from January to January 2027 until the summer while you apply to other programs, because generally these post-bac experiences will give you more research experience and you'll likely be connected to a mentor who can also help you kind of with the your decision to go to graduate school and also looking for programs and also applying and all those things. So that might be something worth looking into as well.
Also, I took 3.5 years off. So if worst case you work for a year or two, it's really never too late if it's something you truly want to do.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And then our next question is going to be from Charlene Atlas. And Charlene asks, for your science communication, what interesting media methods have you tried, such as animation, video, or interactive experiences? What tools do you wish you had for achieving your science communication goals?
So I have become an Adobe Creative Cloud sort of self-taught whiz. I'd say just getting creative. So whether it be videos or animations or flyers and posters, jumping in head first and exploring. So for me, it's been how do I create videos about the universe that feature me, that are about stargazing, right? And so I'd say just exploring what resources do exist. A lot of departments. So we have a creative team here also at Colorado State. There are folks who their whole job are like creative and media content. And so working with those folks, trying to learn how do I process these videos? How do I optimize the reach? How do I make these new components? So I'm definitely not like an expert on it, but finding those people who do have those expertise is something that has been valuable.
I'll say the same thing. Like, I don't have any formal education or background in communication, and I feel like the science communication I do is pretty limited. Um, but I collaborate with people who are very much in that space. I met one of I forget exactly what her titles were, but she's an executive level communicator and has worked for Johnson and Johnson. But we met when she was doing um I forget the title, like maybe public relations and communications at Rutgers University. So she has a consulting business. So I have like reached out to her, like, I am trying to write this resource guide, and this is the community I'm trying to reach. And I need it not to be a bunch of text that no one's going to read. And so, like, reaching out to people who know how to translate those things. And there are people who are very skilled at this is kind of what I've done. I can't, I've done video abstracts, but again, that same person I just mentioned, I reached out to her. There's TGF Consulting in North Carolina. I've worked with them a lot. I recognize it's not my area of expertise, and I think that's something that's great for for academics and scientists to realize we're not experts in everything. It's not my area of expertise. So I definitely reach out to people who are experts in this area, and then I just kind of do what they tell me to do.
Yeah, I'll just say like I haven't tried like video or animation. Most of what I do is interactive experiences when I go out into the public. And it's been learning from, experts on campus, like going to those offices that do that. Our own office has experts in it, and it's helped me become better at, providing those professional development opportunities to others as well. I wasn't ever formally trained in it. I learned a lot of it by doing. And so now that I've gotten a lot more formal training in it, I haven't like used a lot of tools myself because it is not my forte. I've never been like on TikTok or a podcast. Like I wish maybe had gotten into that, but it seems kind of daunting to me to like become a TikTok science communicator. So I haven't tried it, but maybe it'll be something I try in the future. Um, I will say, like just yeah, like speaking to other people both on campus and off campus who do this professionally has been like incredibly good. And I had a night. Oh, I wish I knew better how to use Adobe Suite. I've been learning a lot of Adobe Suite recently, and I want to get better at it because there are a lot of really cool tools in there. And a lot of it's now AI backed, so it can kind of help you as you're doing it, but it kind of gets in my way right now because I don't know what I'm doing. But it's like one of the things I'm working on.
Perfect. Thank you. And then with us having about 3 minutes left, I'm going to choose the last question. And then let's see. It is going to be from Dana Wright. And Dana asks, thank you for mentioning that there are many different pathways to obtaining and fulfilling career in STEM. My path is very different from everyone on the panel. I do not have a PhD. However, I have for 12 years as an informal STEM educator, and it has been such an incredibly fulfilling role. I've worked at planetariums in VA, Virginia, and South Carolina, worked at NASA Wallops Flight Facility as a public engagement coordinator, and now work in the education department at Virginia Spaceport Authority. What matters most? Oh, hold on. That wasn't a question. That was a statement. Give me 1 second. Okay, this question is from Paige Gaudet. And Paige asks, I'm currently pursuing a degree in aerospace engineering at Tuskegee University, and there are not a lot of opportunities for students who are interested in space to network and find opportunities to develop their interests in space. What should I do about this? I'm currently in the process of starting a SEDS chapter, but I want to do more for my school. How can I bring space-related educational and career opportunities to my campus? Geraldine, well, Dr. Cochran, I'm gonna have you go first since you have to leave soon.
Yeah, thank you. I was just reading the question again. Um, I would say find other like-minded people as a first start. Um, if I understood correctly, there aren't these opportunities on your campus right now, and you want to bring more opportunities on your campus related to educational and career, more experiences to your campus related to educational and career. So almost every university has a career center. And the career centers often have a challenging time, I think, collaborating with faculty because we are always busy and we get asked to do things by like just a ton of people. um, and so if you reach out to the career services people and let them know like you as a student want to do this and you can get other students involved, they may help find the space, get the food if you have food, and create the kind of event that you want to have. So just reaching out to them and letting them know you want to partner. Also, if you know the faculty within your department, I think you said you're doing, yes, aerospace engineering, talk to people in your department because there may be faculty in your department who are interested in doing these kind of things or might be willing to support that you are maybe not aware of because you haven't yet maybe talked to them about that. And so sometimes we don't always share all of our interests with our students. I have no idea how much some of the students in my class know that I do. Because I only talk about it like I don't actually talk about it all that much at all when I'm actually teaching the courses that I teach. So you might meet people that way. And then the other thing is talking to your peers because there are some student-led events that are totally awesome and they do not rely on faculty or staff help. Students just come together, they advertise, they do it from start to finish, and they've been beautiful and had a great impact on other students because I feel like students, especially the current generation of students, meaning those who are undergrads right now, know how to speak to each other better than I would know how to speak to them. And so don't be afraid to reach out to your peers and start something from scratch. Brainstorm what is it that you're trying to do? How do you get the materials that you need to make it happen and then go from there.
I will say, like, just kind of adding on to that, like, about, finding your peers. See if there's a process for becoming an officially recognized club. I think maybe that's what you're talking about with the SEDS chapter, but like that can give you resources from your university to do these sorts of things, to like, bring in speakers or to go to conferences. And it also just kind of spreads your footprint when there's like a club on campus that can have its own like web page that other students can find. And so it just kind of like snowballs from there. Um, and I mean, like, usually it doesn't even usually have to be a lot of people. Like, there's a club here on our campus that I think had started with a very small handful of people. They were just really passionate about mechanical keyboards by Dr. Cochran. Um, and they are able to do so much more now that it's grown. And so I think like, yeah, if you just find first like-minded students, if you can become an officially recognized like club or group on campus to free up resources and also to protect your time as like a student. It can be a lot doing it all by yourself. And if you're an officially recognized club, that often comes with like a sponsor department, a sponsor faculty member, a sponsor staff who can also help with like a lot of that lift and bringing in people, bringing in alumni, or bringing in affiliates of your university, bringing in community members who might have the knowledge and things that you're interested in to campus. I think all of that can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and just to echo that, so at CU Boulder, they were recognized or registered student organizations, and there was one I was part of called Science Under the Dome, and just a bunch of us as students got together and we helped facilitate talks in the planetarium. And it started small and we grew. And the university actually, by being an RSO, gave us a budget of $500 a semester. So I'd say, I mean, you'd be surprised how many faculty members might say, hey, that's a great idea. And they'll be willing to sign off to help get you registered. And once you have that infrastructure, then you can build right positions and officers, which can help preserve the longevity of the organization. You can help establish bylaws. And so this just gives your organization a little bit more structure. But finding that community is the first start. There are also national organizations like the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, where you can be sort of like a student ambassador. And they actually want folks at institutions to help with astronomy outreach. So they can provide you with materials that you need so that you can, help spread the message of what you're trying to achieve.
Perfect. And that is time. So that wraps up our session on our panel for Broadcasting the Stars. For the audience, in the link below, oh, hold on. You cannot chat with everyone. Sorry, I was meaning your message. I was gonna put the links for our panelists. It's not working for some reason. But I'm sure you guys can look up our panelists and it seemed, oh, hold on. I think I can do it again. Okay, I did it. So you can I put the links for the panelists in the chat, and everyone can go to their websites and their LinkedIn's, mine's included as well. If you want to reach out to me, there are more events coming for Black Space Week starting tomorrow as well. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming to the panel and have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
No
Everyone, thanks so
problem.
much for